Morning, Mike.
Good morning, Sherry. How are you?
I mean, folks seem to be sort of starting to join now. We're going to give it like 5 minutes and probably start at 11:05 just to give as many people as possible the opportunity to join before we get started. A minute or two here to give any other late arrivals the opportunity to get in before we get going, but it will just be a few minutes. About 11:05. Sherry, I think you've started the recording. So why don't we go ahead and get started? And obviously, if anybody joins late, they can get in and hopefully catch up. So anyway, welcome. Good afternoon or morning, depending upon where you are. Here at Treasury, we have myself, Richard Ift. Also with me today are Sherry Ouellette, Annette Burris, Ted Newman, and John Gudgel, all of the Federal Insurance Office. Also on the call is Mike McCauley from ISO Verisk, who is directing the collection and aggregation of the data through the portal operated by ISO. We also have on the line today Aaron Brandenburg of the NAIC, which coordinates the effort from the standpoint of state insurance regulators. If you have any questions as we go along, you can send them through the chat Q&A function in the on the Zoom page. We're also going to, as we noted, we're recording this, so once this is concluded, we will get this posted on our website in case you want to review anything after the fact, or in case you have any colleagues that may have missed it and want to take listen to it. To get started, as many of you know, this data call is required under Section 104H1 of the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act. It is designed to provide Treasury with a data set that it will use to periodically analyze, among other things, the effectiveness of the terrorism risk insurance program, as well as the competitiveness of small insurers in the terrorism risk insurance marketplace. State regulators collect similar information for regulatory purposes with respect to insurers under their supervision. As has been the case since 2018, Treasury and state regulators are coordinating in this effort with a consolidated approach that will allow reporting by insurers to provide the same data set to Treasury through the portal that's operated by ISO, and to state regulators through a portal that is or will be operated by New York State. In that manner, insurers will thereby satisfy their obligations to both entities by submitting the same data to two different locations. Aaron, anything you want to specifically add to that at the moment in terms of where things are on the state side?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. No, just that state regulators, do continue to work in conjunction with Treasury on this joint data call, and that data will be sent from insurers to those two entities. It needs to be sent to both locations. For state insurance regulators, that data will be sent to the New York State portal, like you said, as we've done in prior years. We're still receiving final approval on the state regulator side, so those emails to company contacts have not gone out yet like they have in prior years, but insurance companies should expect the process to be the same as in prior years, again, with those files being sent to both entities, the New York portal and the state regulator case. And I would just note, we do occasionally have companies that need to refile their data sets. So just please make sure you do so with both entities. You do need to file it, the same data set, both through the Treasury process and through the state regulator process through the New York portal. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. As you know, and most important from our standpoint, as well as I hope yours, we have a regulatory due date for this annual data call, which is May 15th. This date was set in light of FIO's statutory obligation to provide a report to Congress by June 30th, which relies upon the data that we collect. And this year, that report focuses on the effectiveness of the terrorism risk insurance program. If you would, in addition to providing us your data, if you would like to provide comments on the subjects addressed by that study, we did publish a Federal Register notice on March 19th, which is the same day that our notice announcing the commencement of the data call was published. And that the notice for comments does identify various areas of interest on our part in connection with the study. The notice is available on our website, where the information concerning the data call is also located, which actually we have up on the screen here. So if you wanted to take a look for that, if you are providing comments, those we're asking you to get those into us by May 3, as distinguished from the May 15th deadline for the data. And unfortunately, because of the reporting deadline that we have to Congress by June 30th, we are not in a position to provide any extensions to respond to the data call past that May 15th due date. So please do your best to get us the information by then. As was the case last year and for the last several years, we conduct webinars for each of the 4 reporting templates that we use. They are for small insurers, non-small insurers, alien surplus lines insurers, and captive insurers. This webinar addresses alien surplus lines insurers, which for purposes of the data call participate in TRIP by virtue of being listed on the NAIC's quarterly listing of authorized alien surplus lines insurers. Now, the alien surplus lines insurer template should only be used by alien surplus lines insurers that are not part of a group, unless the group consists only of alien surplus lines insurers. Any alien surplus lines insurers that are part of a licensed domestic insurer group should report as part of the group, as part of that domestic group, using either the non-small or the small insurer template, depending upon the size of that group. Again, this webinar will only address the requirements in the alien surplus lines insurer template. If you are affiliated with an alien surplus lines insurer that is part of such a group, we did hold separate webinars for the non-small and the small insurer reporting templates yesterday, and links to the recordings of those webinars will be available on the TRIP website, hopefully in the near future. It takes a little while for us to process them once we get this all wrapped up, but hopefully not more than a week or so after we get that all concluded. The good news for all of you is this year's data call does not contain any material changes from last year's data call. There is, of course, a new model loss question, which appears on the reinsurance worksheet. However, you will see that the model loss question is in a similar format to those from past years. It simply applies a different location and scenario about the attack we seek to model. A few more general comments about reporting before we move into looking at the individual worksheets. As I mentioned, TRIP operates on a group basis, so reporting should also be done on a group basis. I also want to reemphasize how alien surplus lines insurers will report, because there has been some confusion about this in the past, particularly in light of other reporting requirements to the International Insurers Department of the NAIC. And Aaron, I'm going to ask you to correct me if I say anything wrong here. Again, the following conditions, as we understand it, will apply for alien surplus lines insurers in the 2024 TRIP data call. The insurer will need to do one of the following 2 things. First, if an alien surplus lines insurer is affiliated with a larger group, it should report on the relevant non-small or small insurer form. This form needs to be submitted separately to both ISO and the New York portal. Second, if the alien surplus lines insurer is not affiliated with a larger group or is part of a group that only contains alien surplus lines insurers, then the alien surplus lines insurer will use the alien surplus lines template, which we're talking about today. This form also gets submitted to ISO in the New York portal. And again, that's currently due May 15th in both cases. However, as many of you also probably know, alien surplus lines insurers have an additional reporting requirement for IID, or the International Insurers Department of the NAIC, which I believe they also are using this alien surplus lines insurer template. And that reporting is done on an individual company basis, I believe. Aaron, can you add anything on that? Because I don't want to misstate anything on that. This is not a Treasury requirement, but we also want to make sure everybody does what they need to do.
Yeah, that's correct, Richard. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so just keep that in mind. I think the individual company reporting for the IID the deadline for that might be a little later, but in any event, I'm certain that the folks at the IID will reach out to you and make sure you do that at some point. But just remember, that will be a separate thing. Doing this Treasury NAIC joint data call will not, you'll still need to address that at some point. So back to the process we're here for today. Registration and form completion. The process to start the data call is pretty simple. You will go to the data collection website, which is, and the Sherry is hovering over the address, www.tripsection111data.com. And go ahead and click on that, and you will leave there, and you will find yourself here, which is the data portal. You will see at the bottom there is a PDF form to download, which is the registration form. You will then fill that registration form out and email it to the address provided, which is tripsection111data@iso.com. And then that form has a point of contact that you will enter. And once the form has been submitted, you will receive an email from ISO with a link to a secure portal. That secure portal will contain your required reporting form. We do get questions occasionally from insurers saying they haven't received their reporting templates. So remember, you won't receive your reporting templates until you register and fill that out. This is something you do need to do every year. It doesn't carry over from year to year, even if you've been reporting over multiple years. So please make sure to do that. Once you have collected your data and completed the reporting form, you will send it back to ISO through the same secure portal. The form will be provided to you in Excel format. However, if you prefer to report using a CSV form, please notify ISO of that, and they will provide you with the specifications you need to submit your data in CSV format instead. And Mike, I guess I will sort of just, if you can give folks an update on where the registration is from your standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. Thank you. Depending upon which folks are on the line here, as of today, all registered alien surplus lines insurers have received the response, basically a secure email from Verisk with instructions to access the SFTP accounts in order to access their actual data templates. At this point in time, we do have 3 that are pending. So if any of you on the call here have not received that secure email, you should expect one pretty shortly. If you have received a secure email and have encountered any issues accessing the email or accessing your SFTP account, please feel free to reach out to us at the tripsection111data@iso.com email address. And that's my update, Richard.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And again, which we noted this before, remember that although this is a consolidated data call, you do need to separately submit your completed reporting form to the New York portal for state reporting purposes. Submitting your data only to ISO will only fulfill your obligations under the Treasury data call. Similarly, submitting your form only to the New York portal will not fulfill your obligations under the Treasury data call. And again, there is that individual reporting requirement, which you'll no doubt be aware of as well with the IID. And again, as Aaron noted before, if at least I think he did, but if he didn't, I mean, sometimes it happens as the reporting goes on. Either you might note an error, or some of the validation exercises we do might note something, and we might ask you to address something or correct something. If that happens and you submit an updated form, please make sure you do that to both portals to make sure that both the Treasury as well as the New York portal have the same information. Now, briefly on workers' compensation insurance, and I understand that as alien surplus lines insurers, we're probably not many people have that issue, but if you might, I understand, data for excess workers' compensation policies, which I understand might be written, needs to be reported in the same manner as the other data elements. As you may know, certain data elements for workers' compensation coverage that's provided by admitted companies is being reported separately to ISO by NCCI and certain other workers' compensation rating bureaus. Again, I suspect that's not going to be applicable to any companies reporting on the alien surplus lines template. However, if you have any specific questions about your organization's particular situation, please contact either Treasury or ISO. Now, if you have any questions as you collect your data and complete the reporting forms, your first action should be to review the instructions for the alien surplus line insurer form that you will be completing. And there's a link to that on the website right there at instructions. Oop. There. Oop. Sherry, your cursor seems to be moving about.
Which link are you looking for, Richard?
The instructions for the alien surplus lines form. Next one over the instructions form. Yeah, there it is. Anyway, this is on the website. So the instructions are there. They literally do contain guidelines in addition, and they're about 15 or 20 pages long, I think, but they have some sort of general guidance. But more importantly, as you go through each individual cell of the reports, there's basically information on each cell that we're seeking information on. So if it's not immediately apparent to you what we're looking for on the form itself, you should be able to get a little more guidance there. Okay, you can go out of that. If you go back to that main page, we also have a document on the Treasury website that provides examples of how to report various data elements. That's the sample fact pattern document, particularly those that might not be immediately intuitive. And you'll see there's sort of exemplars there with explanations. Note that we've done this on the non-small insurer form, which is different in terms of how the lines that are used for the alien surplus lines form. However, the principles that are sort of set forth in there are the same from form to form. So you might find that helpful as well. So if you still have any questions after reviewing the instructions or sitting through this webinar or anything else, you can obtain help in response to a specific question by emailing trip section 111 data@iso.com. In response to this email, you'll get either a written email response, a call from ISO, or a call from Treasury. Alternatively, you can directly call ISO or Treasury to ask your question or contact us. We've put contact information at least I think we have, there's contact information in the chat for Mike McCauley at Veris, as well as for the Treasury team on the call. So, you can feel free to reach out to us directly if you have any questions as well. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and start walking through the individual worksheets. So Sherry, go ahead and pull up that. Yep, this is the first page of, and again, this is a PDF version of the worksheet. Obviously, when you get this, it will be an Excel spreadsheet, a live Excel spreadsheet. We walk through a PDF version, which is a little easier to manipulate in connection with this process, but otherwise it will be and act like a real Excel spreadsheet once you get it from Veris. So again, as we go through these, if you have any questions and you want to sort of tender an anonymous question, go ahead and put them in the Q&A chat, and if you direct them to Sherry, only the Treasury folks will see them, and they won't be visible to anyone else. Of course, if you want to just send them to everybody, we'll respond to those as well. But either way, we'll respond to questions as we go along, or certainly at the end of the presentation. Again, the Excel spreadsheets you get will be tailored based upon your individual reporting needs. So they will include separate sheets for each jurisdiction you need and that sort of thing. Again, for purposes of today's webinar, we're just going to hit the PDF versions. All right, this what you're seeing on the screen now is the affiliations, insurer group affiliations worksheet. Again, this is really just a mechanism for us to identify what entities you are reporting for. Again, reporting is done on a group basis unless obviously you are a single company. You should only be listing alien surplus lines insurers here. Again, if you are attempting to list any admitted companies, you should be completing either the non-small or small insurer template instead. We ask you to provide the number on the code numbers assigned by the IID for tracking purposes. That would go in column B. If you are an insurer that does not have such a number for whatever reason, ISO will assign you a number for tracking purposes. If you have reported before, please use the same company identification number that you have used in prior years. Now, to the right, you'll see you will need to report the group's total 2022, not 2023, but 2022 policyholder surplus using the same number if you would have been required to report that for any state statutory reporting purposes, or otherwise how that would have been done if you did do that and are not otherwise required to report. Also there, you'll see you need to report your 2022, again, trip eligible lines premium. That's also in column G with the number in column H. That number is used to calculate your calendar year 2023 program deductible, and you will need to use that when responding to questions on the reinsurance worksheet, which we'll come to at the end of the webinar. If you reported a figure last year that you now believe to be an error based upon further evaluation or update, then please enter the revised number this year. The instructions for this field clarify how insurers that, for whatever reason, did not have any trip eligible direct earned premium in 2022 should report, as some insurers in this situation in prior years have simply reported a zero deductible. For such insurers, the program rules actually specify that an estimate gets made based upon their current 2023 trip eligible lines DEP. The instructions will specify that if you are in this unusual situation, such as a new entrant in the market that's just beginning to write trip eligible lines insurance, please take a look at those, the information in the instructions, which basically follows the program rules in terms of what number to put in. Now, in the next sheet, going down, this is the policies and direct earned premium worksheet. Here, you will report your direct earned premium and policy count. We ask alien surplus lines insurers to report here using the line descriptions used for Solvency II purposes, even though TRIP is otherwise managed with reference to NAIC state reporting lines. But we determined that based on comments that it would be easier for most alien surplus lines insurers that are only reporting that to report on that basis. It is also important to remember here, though, when reporting your premium, even if you are sort of looking at the state reporting lines to manage what you report, there are some differences. I mean, to the extent, and this would be true of the solvency lines as well, TRIP only covers commercial lines coverage. So to the extent you have personal lines coverage in any of these groupings, you would not report that, even if you otherwise report it for Solvency II purposes. Also, in addition, keep in mind another principal difference is professional liability errors and omissions coverage, which may well fall within general liability lines on this worksheet. Those are expressly excluded from TRIP. So again, please don't report that information here. So again, long story short, there might be amounts that you would report for Solvency II purposes, but you would not do so here. The instructions identify those differences. So please take a look at those to make sure you're accurately reporting what you need to report. Now, as you see in column D, your total 2023 TRIP eligible DEP is going to auto-populate in column D based upon what you enter in columns E, F, and G, which break down your policies based upon whether terrorism risk insurance was declined, whether it was provided for no cost, or whether it was provided by you for some sort of express premium. If you provide a number in column G, then column for that you provided coverage pursuant to a premium, then column H should actually contain the actual amount that was charged for that risk premium. And thus column H will be a subset of column G, which shows the policy's overall premium. Again, premium should be entered on a direct earned basis for calendar year 2023. This means that if you have a policy that started before January 1, 2023, or ended after December 31, 2023, you should only include the premium that was earned during 2023 for that policy. If a policy covers multiple states, the premium should be allocated to each state proportionally in the same manner that it would be reported for state reporting purposes. Now, policy count is going to be entered in columns I through K, and as with premium, you will divide the policies based upon whether terrorism risk coverage was declined, included for no cost, or included for some amount of premium. These amounts will automatically add up and appear in column L. Keep in mind that your policy count will be calculated differently than a premium. Essentially, a policy should be counted for count date purposes if it incepted at any time in 2023, or if incepted before 2023 but remained in effect on December 31, 2023. So as an example, if you had a policy that started on January 1, 2021 and ended on December 31, 2023, you would include the policy in your policy count. Similarly, you had a policy that began on July 1, 2022 and ended on December 31, 2023, you would also include that policy in your policy count. But if your policy began on July 1, 2022, but expired on June 30th, 2023, the policy should not be included in the policy count because the policy neither incepted in 2023, nor was it in effect on December 31, 2023. I want to highlight that if any of you have policies that cover multiple lines of insurance as reflected here, you will end up with double counting for policies because you should be counting the policy one time for each line of insurance where it appears. So let's say you had a policy that provided coverage for both fire, and general liability, you would record a policy count of 1 in both rows 10 and 11. You would see that these numbers, you would see that if you add these numbers vertically, you'll get double counting of the policy. However, the horizontal policy count for the specific line should still be accurate. Beyond this, you're going to ensure that any policy that covers multiple states is also counted on each state worksheet that you have. Now, finally, the last thing you will enter is your total policy count for the state, which gets entered in line 14. And again, that essentially takes care, or at least for each state, we try to address the double counting by lines by entering in so that you wouldn't be multiplying policies. That policy that covered fire and general liability and got 2 ticks in the lines above would get entered as just one policy in row 14. Next sheet, standalone terrorism. This worksheet, which is done on a nationwide, not on a state basis, asks you to provide information about any standalone policies that you have which cover only terrorism risk. Again, only policies that cover only for terrorism risk, not policies that cover other risks or cover terrorism in addition to other risks. So for comparative purposes, you will see we are asking you here for information on policies that provide coverage for both acts of terrorism certified under TRIA in line 4, but as well as policies that provide coverage for acts of terrorism that would not be subject to TRIA, and that's line 5. And again, we do that for comparative purposes. Again, this data gets reported on a nationwide basis, and in addition to the DEP, you also need to provide data as well on the number of policies issued and information on exposure and limits of liability. Again, note that the premium figures that show up here, certainly for at least for the information that's subject to TRIP, should also show up in the relevant lines on the prior worksheet as well. So the standalone sheet will essentially be a subset of, at least for the TRIP eligible line coverage of the prior worksheet. But so make sure you enter that in there as well. Next sheet. Next sheet is the worksheet for cyber risk. Although there were a number of expanded areas of inquiry introduced for the first time in the 2022 data call, the categories have not changed for this year. So as in prior years, we are continuing to seek information on both standalone cyber policies, and you would enter that information in column C, as well as cyber endorsements attached to another policy or what usually referred to as a package policy, which you would put in at column D. And those figures should auto-populate in column E to the totals for both. You should not provide any information on non-affirmative or silent cyber coverage. Again, a policy that might cover some sort of cyber loss because cyber is not specifically excluded in the policy. We're only asking you to report information on affirmative cyber coverage in this worksheet. Now, lines 3 through 6, 8 through 9, and 18 to 19 request information concerning premium, number of policies, and limits for cyber policies in the TRIP eligible lines of insurance. That information has been requested since we started collecting cyber information, I think back in 2018, and is continuing to be requested. You should continue to respond to these questions as you have in the past. Lines 7, 10, and 20 request the same information concerning premium, number of policies, and limits, but that is as applied to cyber policies written in non-TRIP eligible lines of insurance. While the information is the same as the sort of information as we've requested in the past, we have expanded it to include policies written in the non-TRIP eligible lines so that we can assess the amount of cyber insurance that is currently not subject to the program. Our understanding is this will largely be cyber insurance that is currently being coded or characterized or reported as professional liability insurance, which, as I noted before, is subject to an exclusion under TRIA. So a cyber policy that's written in that fashion would not be covered by TRIA, even if it was subject to an act of terrorism. Now, these questions, assuming you write policies in this fashion, should be answered in the same way as you would respond to the questions for policies written in the TRIP eligible lines. Now, as I noted, there were some changes in 2022. For the first time, we began requesting certain categories of information involving premium and number of policies allocated by the size of the policyholder. That's in lines 12 to 17. Lines 21 to 24, limits specific to cyber extortion and ransom payments. And finally, lines 25 to 30, loss information specific to cyber extortion and ransom payments. Those requests have not changed. Last year, for one of these categories, and that's the premium and number of policies allocated by size of policyholders, we provided an option last year, which also remains the case this year, for providing this report based upon either the number of employees of the policyholders. So you'll see the spreadsheet identifies sort of by small, medium, and large buckets by size of number of employees for policyholders, or that can be reported using revenue categories, again, specified in both the worksheet as well as in the instructions for small, medium, and large policyholders. Please note that this is an either or election you need to make. We don't want you reporting some of your information by number of employees and other of your information by revenue, and we do try to track that. Mike, can you please briefly address how we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So subsequent to the registration process, when you receive the secure email, an attachment provides SFTP instructions. This accounts for the naming convention as it relates to the cyber workbook itself. So by default, there is a letter Z that is listed in the naming convention. So if a entity is going to be reporting by the number of employees, the instructions ask that you change the Z to an E, versus if you're reporting by revenue, change the Z to an R. And that's explicitly stated within the instructions, and that will appropriately allow us to track what mechanism you're reporting under.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And so please try to pay attention to that. I mean, it's, we are required to, when we provided this sort of either or way of reporting, while the people we have to answer to permitted that, they wanted us to do it in a way where we could track the information just in case it appears that the results are anomalous doing it one way or the other. So we can't do that unless we know. So please do make that election. Now, there are no questions, or I'm sorry, there are many questions. There are no changes to the questions concerning limits specific to cyber extortion and ransom payments. As we have explained before, the distinction we draw here is between coverage for cyber extortion generally, which of course we understand can contain many different policy benefits apart from payment of an actual ransom or reimbursement, versus limits for the actual ransom payment. To the extent your policies do not have a distinction, it's one limit that covers both, then you would simply report the same limit. What we are trying to get at is if there is a different limit for cyber extortion generally versus the actual ransom payment. The information here is being requested separately as between policies in TRIP versus non-TRIP eligible lines. Finally, the last category on the worksheet, the loss information specific to cyber extortion and ransom payments, is requested for all cyber policies combined, whether in the TRIP eligible lines or not. The questions seek paid and incurred amounts for cyber extortion generally, and paid amounts for ransom payments, along with the number of claims such ransom payments are associated with. Finally, direct defense amounts for cyber extortion generally, without any effort to segregate that as to the ransom payments specifically, are sought, and again, on a paid and incurred basis. And again, that's sort of the summary of that. We can respond to further questions on that if you have it. But again, if you think you got it right last year, there are no changes to the way we were doing it last year. So, but if you certainly have questions, you can either ask them or contact us separately. Okay, next page is the exposure basis by by jurisdiction. Here, we want you to report your exposures on a jurisdictional basis. As with reporting DEP, you will provide the data based on Solvency II reporting lines. You are also asked to identify exposures here, whether basically where terrorism coverage was provided or where it is not provided. The purpose here is to calculate the total potential exposure under the policies. In other words, the most that you might have to pay under the policy in question. This worksheet also asks you to specifically identify policy limits where nuclear, biological, chemical, or radiological, or NBCR or CBRN risks, depending on how you characterize that, are not excluded. So this is requested for both property and liability exposures. So as you'll see in column D, you will be providing policy limits of property policies where terrorism risk insurance is provided. Then in column E, you will look at that same universe of policies and report the policy limits for only those policies where NBCR coverage is not excluded from the policy. So if there are NBCR sublimits in place, those should be reflected accordingly in the exposure recorded in column E. So column E should be a subset of the figure identified in column D, unless it's you basically cover NBCR risks entirely, in which case presumably the numbers would be the same. The same reporting method will be used in columns I and J over to the right on the spreadsheet to report limits of liability for liability policies. Now, also to clarify, if a policy provides terrorism risk coverage for any type of NBCR exposure, even if some types of NBCR exposures are excluded, then this policy exposure should be included as not excluding NBCR coverage. So in other words, if a policy might exclude nuclear risks, but covers chemical or radiological risks, then you should go ahead and record the policy information as providing coverage in columns E and J, respectively. In addition, if this probably doesn't apply to anybody on this call, and I think this is an issue with respect to admitted policies, there are fire following laws in some states with regard to the standard fire policy. I suspect nobody here is probably issuing those, but if you did, in which case the policy might be required to respond to a fire loss caused by an NBCR event, even if it excluded that. Again, we're not, even if you're in that situation, but if your policy does otherwise purport to exclude it, go ahead and reflect that it's excluded, because we can address the effect of those statutory provisions separately. Now, we also request on this sheet, as been the case of prior data calls, information on policyholder deductibles or self-insured retentions. You'll see that's in columns F for the property and columns K for the liability. Now, these should be reported in connection with only primary level policies that reference a policyholder deductible or self-insured retention. Don't report this in connection with high level excess or umbrella policies, because that's going to give us double counting. We're sort of relying upon the primary level carrier to report the deductible in that situation. So if if you're higher up in a tower, you can ignore that. We'll rely upon the primary carrier to report that. If you are reporting it, though, and the policy contains multiple deductibles or self-insured retentions within the same jurisdiction, please use the lowest deductible or self-insured retention within that state. You would use the same logic when filling out the exposure worksheet for the United States as a whole, and use the overall lowest deductible or self-insured retention for the policy. I also want to review some of the differences in how exposure information should be reported as compared to premium. First of all, you want to report your exposure information on a per occurrence basis. Next, whereas you would divide premium information proportionally by jurisdiction, with exposure, please report the relevant limit for each jurisdiction, even if an aggregate limit might cap your exposure across multiple jurisdictions. So, for example, if you had one policy providing $1 million of coverage in 2 states, let's say Oregon and California, you would report $1 million of exposure on each of the California and Oregon worksheets, even though the policy had a single overall limit of $1 million. You also need to fill out a U.S. worksheet, which aggregates all of your policies together. In this example, on the U.S. worksheet, you would provide the overall policy limit and take into account any limits that might apply across multiple jurisdictions. So in the example I just gave, 1 million would be the overall U.S. exposure because of a single policy providing $1 million in coverage. Also, as a reminder, if the policy has a single occurrence limit, you should use that single occurrence limit. If for some reason there is no single occurrence limit, please use the policy's aggregate limit. Another difference between the DEP spreadsheet and the exposure spreadsheet is that you should be calculating exposure based on policies that were in force on December 31st, 2023. Now, this differs from the premium worksheet, which asks you to include all premium earned in 2023, even if a policy expired before December 31. So again, on the exposure worksheet, only if a policy terminated before December 31, 2023, you should not include that policy in your calculations. Once again, you'll see there are some workers' compensation fields to the right. If you are in the rare circumstance of a carrier providing that coverage as an alien surplus lines insurer, which may not actually exist at all, the rating bureaus would provide that. However, if you do write any excess workers' compensation coverage, please enter the information in there. Okay, next sheet is the policyholder industry code. On this page, please categorize premium for your policies using your choice of NAICS codes or SIC codes. You'll be providing data for both property and liability policies, and once again, dividing these based upon whether coverage was terrorism risk coverage was provided or not. You will see that there is an unavailable option down at the bottom of the NAICS code section, as well as at the bottom of the SIC code section. There isn't an option to report everything in this field, but we do recognize that some data may not be reasonably be able to be captured with this level of detail due to changes in systems. So again, that is something you can use to report something that doesn't get captured, but obviously we do encourage you to try to be as accurate as you can in dividing up your premium on that basis. Once again, note at the right with respect to workers' compensation, you will need to enter in any excess workers' compensation issues or information in connection with those amounts. Next worksheet is places of worship. This form collects data on the availability and affordability of terrorism risk insurance for places of worship. This year's worksheet remains the same. and it is requesting that data be reported on a nationwide basis and categorized by property, liability, and workers' compensation policies. We only want information on policies written for the actual places of worship. When you're reporting this data, please do your best to only report coverage related to actual houses of worship and exclude any affiliated religious organizations such as possibly a hospital or a school. We have identified what we believe to be the proper NAICS, SIC, and ISO class codes that would cover this. If you can report your information using one of these classification systems, please do so. If you can't, but you have another way to extract this data, such as a policyholder name search, please do that instead. You will see there is no category for unavailable or unknown here because we have a specific request from Congress to provide them this information. So we're asking you to provide us that information. So please find a way to report it, using your best way to extract that information. Next worksheet is geographic exposures. You can view this sheet as requesting the same sort of information that AM Best asks for on the terrorism questionnaire that generates each year. In fact, the geographic descriptions here are the same as those used by AM Best. In addition, to help with reporting, and Sherry, you don't need to click over to this, but there is a link on the main annual data collection page to a compiled complete list of zip codes for each jurisdiction on this worksheet, because you'll see AM Best, while in some cases they list it by zip code, in other cases they ask you just report all the information in for a particular county. If it's easier for you to generate the information by zip code, we have basically collected all the zip codes for each of these areas in that worksheet, which appears on our collection page. So that can be downloaded as an Excel file from our website if you find that helpful to respond to the question. Note the file there will actually say it's the 2022 file. That is because, based on our determination, there have not been any material changes since 2022. So even though it says 2022, you can use that for purposes of this 2024 data call. So otherwise, again, please use your best approximation on providing information for each of these metropolitan areas. And again, this worksheet does ask for data on any excess workers' compensation policies you provide. Moving to the next page of it, you will see that we ask about aggregations. Go on one more page down, Sherry. That's more of the individual metro areas. You will see here on this page, we ask about aggregations within specific zip codes to see which zip codes within the United States have the highest rates of aggregation. So what you would do is add up all exposures in your zip codes and then provide us with the information associated with your top 5 zip codes in rank order, either whether it's one of the designated metropolitan areas, which is in the first set of questions, or if it's in basically everywhere else in the country. So basically, add everything up and do that rank order and report the information. Now, by contrast, you go to lines 49 and 50. What we're asking you for there is really for you to provide your probable maximum, your largest probable maximum loss associated with the coverage you write associated with terrorism. Here we want you to basically, and that's really for us, even though we asked for the zip code for identification purposes, we're asking for pick your location where you have the highest aggregation and enter where it is by zip code in line 49, and in line 50, enter the amount. Next page, and you'll be glad to hear. Last page is the final worksheet on reinsurance. You will need to answer these questions for your private third-party reinsurance protection. You should not include any intra-company arrangements that you might have in place. So if you're basically doing a reinsurance arrangement within a group for various financial responsibility reasons, we're not interested in that. I'm sure Aaron and his folks might be interested in that, but we are simply interested in any third-party arrangements that you have in place. We strongly recommend that if you have an individual responsible for reinsurance in your company, that you forward this worksheet to them for completion. This will help ensure the accuracy of the data we receive. In addition, when responding to this worksheet, we need you to enter actual figures in column C. We understand that, I mean numbers. We understand that in a complex reinsurance program, it may be difficult to provide a single answer. But if you basically provide in there C addendum or C attachment, it's very difficult for us to basically try to parse that out. And in fact, we at Treasury don't even get that information. So basically, we're asking you, please put in there what you view to be the best answer that characterizes what your reinsurance is. And again, if you basically leave that blank or leave a reference, it basically doesn't allow us to consider the information. So if you have any questions about that, or you want us to, we can certainly opine on what number you should put in. Please reach out directly to either Treasury or ISO, and we'll walk you through that. One fields I did want to highlight here is we do request reinsurance purchases for Nat Cat losses to lines 8 through 10, I believe. We do occasionally receive questions about why we do that. It's really for a comparative point in whether the differences in the reinsurance market is providing Nat Cat reinsurance versus terrorism. Obviously changes over time. It's based on changes in the market, and we wanted you to, it is important to us to get that information so we see how the market is providing reinsurance coverage for terrorism risk versus other risks that reinsurance is obviously a significant component of. You will also see there is a question about any additional terrorism exclusions that might apply to your reinsurance contracts, separate and apart from domestic and foreign exclusions in lines 12 to 13. That's in line 26. That's meant to capture situations where if your reinsurance protection excludes risks at a particular location or within particular certain metropolitan areas, that's where you would identify that there. Now, on the next page is the model loss scenario for this year. This year's hypothetical loss scenario focuses on a location in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. The scenario involves a dirty bomb blast at a street location, and GPS coordinates are provided as well in the scenario description if you need those to model your potential loss. Please follow as well any of the other instructions in the description of the scenario in your assessment. Now, before I get to the mechanics of how the numbers should play out, I will provide a little more sort of information on, what we're looking for there. Obviously, it's a bomb blast of 100 pounds of TNT. That is at a particular location. If you have a property exposure literally at the point where we've dropped the the point with the GPS location, obviously you could conceivably have some physical property damage there. However, the real issue we're looking for here is basically any workers' compensation losses associated with the area of interest, which we've also defined. It's basically an area moving to the north and northeast of that point, going out about 10 kilometers. We've tried to describe that in the description. For workers' compensation, obviously, we assume if you write that, and that's a good question, if you do write that, and obviously we appreciate many of you might not be, that's something that would be covered since nothing gets excluded from workers' compensation. So Please model that as best you can. Otherwise, with respect to the property damage, we would assume we're looking at either cleanup expense if you actually provide coverage for cleanup expense, and that we appreciate might be not a lot. On the other hand, the other potentially significant exposure might be if you have business interruption that would apply. So please, consider your portfolio. We appreciate that some modeling programs might not assess this risk. So if your policy would respond to a business interruption loss associated with a dirty bomb event, please come up with the best estimate you can based upon the coverage you're writing. And otherwise, if you have any questions as you're working through that, and again, assuming you have coverage in that area of Atlanta, if you don't, obviously you wouldn't be responding to this at all. But if you do, that's what we're looking for. So in terms of if you do determine you've got some exposure here, basically what we're asking you to do is figure out the policies you have exposure. Obviously, if your policyholder did not purchase terrorism risk insurance, you would not have any calculation for that because your policy wouldn't respond there. But for the policies that do respond, we ask you to take those, figure out what the total projected loss would be that would potentially trigger under the policies you have, not for the event as a whole, but just the policies you have. And then we're asking you to allocate that in these defined categories. And the categories really show up as lines 31 to 36. And you will find, I hope, that once you put that information in there, that will total up in line 30, which is the total figure. Obviously, we're assuming that some of the loss that might fall under your policies might get allocated back to the policyholder, either as a deductible or self-insured retention. That would go in line 31. Next, each of you, if you're in the program, have a trip deductible. We talked about that at the beginning. That trip deductible is an amount that is basically 20% of your prior year premium. So that 2022 trip eligible lines premium represents your deductible amount. That deductible could be satisfied by your company on a net basis. Obviously, that's line 32. We appreciate as well, you may have purchased reinsurance covering part of that exposure. That would be entered on line 33. Next, you would have a claim if your losses, total projected losses, are large enough, you would have a potentially a claim under trip. And what you would do to calculate that would be to then take that total loss figure, subtract out the deductible retention that goes off the bottom since that gets paid by the policyholder. Next, subtract out your deductible amount, and that would be a combination of lines 32 and 33. The figure you're left with is essentially the amount above your deductible. You would multiply that figure by 80%, and that gets entered in line 34. That is the share of loss that the government pays under TRIP. And then the balance of 20% would get entered in a combination of lines 35 and 36. Again, either net to your own company or group, or whatever you were able to obtain in connection with reinsurance. So again, that process hasn't changed year over year, but if you find you're triggered by this, you should really, when you're doing this and concluding what you're reporting, your lines from 31 to 36 really should add up to what is in line 30. If it doesn't, you're not doing it right. So, go ahead and do that. I mean, most people do get it right, but if you do this and you've got a figure in line 30 that doesn't add up to the sum of lines 31 to 36, you've done it wrong. Please feel free to reach out to any of us at Treasury. And we're happy to walk you through it. I mean, happy to have a conversation. You can tell us what you're coming up with, and we will tell you to put it in the right buckets. Obviously, we're trying to figure out, if we did, God forbid, have a situation like this, here's the losses that would go through to the policies as well as potentially to the program. And, that's one of the things we do try to report on. So with that, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. So I've talked at you now for quite a while. Anyone have any questions? And look, you can either put them in the chat if you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question. That's fine too. Either way you want to do it is good. I must have explained everything just perfectly here. No questions. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, again, obviously we understand people probably haven't, I don't know if anybody's actually reported anything in yet. So if you do have any questions, I do want to reiterate, we're very happy to help out with this. So if anything comes up as you're doing this, please let us know. But otherwise, we will get this, get the recording set up and put a link to it. Will be up on our website if you do want to go back to it. And otherwise, good luck with the reporting, and have a great rest of the week. Take care.